Potter. It's a team from Toronto, Canada. We, the North, are now we, the champions.
What is going on, Raptors Nation? It is Luca here, back with the Raptors Nation podcast. Hope you're all doing well. We got an interesting episode of the pod as the trade deadline is fast approaching on February 6th. Michael Grange of Sportsnet recently put out an interesting piece that I want to take a look at. And then we're going to look into the Raptors trade candidates ahead of the 2025 NBA trade deadline. The vets have been playing well. The Raptors have been winning. Now is the perfect time to sell. So we're going to take a look at all that and more. Do me a solid, guys. Drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you are new. And be sure to rate this podcast a 5-star review wherever you get your favorite podcast. You can find this podcast, Apple, iTunes, Spotify, the Raptors Nation podcast, coming to you every single week, either Thursday or Friday, depending on when the Raptors play. But yeah, things are getting interesting. There are rumors coming out by the day. A lot of chatter. What is this team going to do? Are they going to get involved in a Jimmy Butler trade and be a facilitator of a deal? Everything seems to be on the table, at least from, the reports that we've been reading about the Raptors looking to get involved at the deadline. How aggressive are they going to be? Which players are they indeed going to sell and try to offload? But we're first going to start with a really interesting piece by Michael Grange of Sportsnet. Go check out the article if you haven't already. Grange dropping a lot of interesting tidbits in this write-up. And one of the main takeaways I had from this write-up from Grange wasn't, the fact that the Raptors have a lot of names that keep popping up around the trade deadline. When you talk about Olynyk, Brown, Boucher, etc., we'll get to that in just a minute. It was actually looking at the Raptors' Untouchables. And I'm going to actually just read what Grange wrote and react to it as we go along here. So Grange put out, the message from league sources is the Raptors remain fully committed to a rebuild featuring 4-year wing Scottie Barnes as a cornerstone. And they've seen enough from second-year guard Grady Dick to convince them that the 21-year-old is a long-term fit. But after that, they don't view anyone on the roster as untouchable. So I found that to be very interesting because I'm not surprised that Scottie Barnes is untouchable. I'm not even surprised that Grady Dick is untouchable. And by the way, Grady Dick, how did he follow up reading that he's untouchable? Well, he actually had a nice game against Atlanta, and he's been doing a much better job of finishing at the rim. Started off hot in that game. What was he? 4 of 4 from the field in the first 6 minutes. Completed a nice alley-oop pass from Jakob Poeltl. You want to see Grady do more of that. And going back to the finishing, what's crazy is in Dick's first 36 games, he had just 8 dunks. In his last 2 games, he has 4 dunks. So you want to see Grady show you more with, his ability to move without the ball, finish at the rim, and then, of course, you want him to be efficient when he shoots the basketball. So I'm not surprised that Scottie Barnes and Grady Dick are deemed untouchable. What I was surprised by a tad bit is that kind of leaves the realm of possibility when you look at the other supposed core pieces of this Raptors team, right? Emmanuel Quickley and RJ Barrett, because that was touted to being the Raptors' young big three, at least for the next couple of years of Barnes, Barrett, Quickley, barbecue. But as we know, things change very quickly in the NBA. And a lot of times your initial plan is just an initial plan and things can move all over the place. And Grange went on to say this: while the Raptors' young group has shown progress this season, it hasn't been uniform across the roster. Emmanuel Quickley has already burned through 1 year of the 5-year, $175 million contract he signed last summer, playing just 9 games so far on a team that has won 11. It's far too early to draw conclusions, and Quickley is just 25 years old and in his 5th season, but the way the year has gone has done little to quell the view in some corners that the deal was an overpay, however slight. So the thing about Quickley I'm not going to make it a huge deal. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt, but it's not good, right? Let's call it for what it is. He's now dealing with his third separate injury of the season. He hasn't been able to stay healthy. And that's the worst thing that could have happened too quickly following the lucrative deal he just signed. As Grange put it, he basically burned through this first year. He can still come back and redeem himself, but even in the games that we've seen him play in, I mean, he hasn't really played to that contract. He's had his moments, but I would say for the most part, it's been average, right? And if you really want to look at it, I know the Raptors are doing a ton of losing overall and they were dealing with a lot of injuries, but in those 9 games, the Raptors are 2-7 with Quickly in those games. And they have won 4 or 5, and Quickly hasn't played in the last stretch of games. So I'm not trying to pinpoint this on Quickly. Oh, the Raptors are winning because Quickly's not out there. What I'm saying is it's not a good look. And if this theme kind of continues and Quickly can't stay healthy and he develops this injury prone tendency of coming back and then missing a stretch and coming back, because that's basically been the theme for a season thus far, what is that contract going to look like at the end of the day? Are the Raptors going to be super committed to Quickly as their franchise point guard of the future? Because remember, they gave him this deal based on potential. They gave him this deal because they thought he could be this team's franchise point guard. It's not off to a good start. They're not going to give up on him after half a season or even after a full season. But if he doesn't bounce back for the rest of this season, next season, it's going to make for some interesting conversations. And, Emmanuel Quickly, I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt. I thought, and I still think he can be a very good player for this team. I was actually higher on Quickly than Barrett. That might have changed since the start of the season. That concerns me a bit, right? You want to see him not have setbacks. You want to see him be able to gel with Barnes and Barrett, because you're starting to see how Barnes, Barrett, and company are starting to come together nicely. You want Quickly to be a part of that, because if you're doing all this winning and building all these habits without one of your important players, things are going to get disrupted maybe once he comes back. So hopefully for Quickly's sake, he can rebound nicely. He can get back into the fold and he can show people that he's worth that contract. And again, this was a big year for him because he had never been a full-time starter. Again, coming off that big contract, a lot of eyeballs were on Quickly, but I think a lot of people would agree it's been underwhelming for sure. And a lot of it is just unfortunate because of the injury setting him back. Maybe we're having an entirely different conversation if he does stay healthy, and maybe he's putting up solid numbers to this point. But the fact that things have played out the way that they've had, it warrants these kind of conversations. So I'm not ready to give up on Quickly, but it is important to see how things play out with Quickly and when he does get back and how he looks when he gets back and if he can stay out there on the floor. This is what Grange said about about RJ Barrett. RJ Barrett has had a career season, but that could conceivably be an obstacle. If there's a feeling he's outplayed the value of the 2 years and $57 million remaining on his contract, given that all of the other players in the NBA averaging 22 points, 6 rebounds, and 6 assists are on max deals, it's a justifiable point of view. Regardless, it should make for some interesting conversation when the possibility of a contract extension comes up this summer. So with RJ, and let me just make one thing clear. I do not anticipate a Quickly or RJ Barrett trade going down before the trade deadline. But what's interesting about RJ is the fact that he is playing really well. And like Grange put it, guys who are putting up his numbers are on max deals. And the Raptors don't have to worry about Barrett's contract. But when you start getting into contract extensions and wanting to keep him here, they're going to have to pay him. So then that begs a bigger decision on the Raptors' part. If they don't view Barrett as a long-term fit, as being that number 2, even number 3 piece, maybe they're reluctant to pay him as so. Because if he continues putting up these numbers, Barrett's going to get paid. He's going to warrant a max, potentially. So the Raptors are going to have to figure out, is this something that works? Because they have Barnes under that contract. They just inked Quickly. So how is this all going to come together? the Raptors were hoping, guys are living up to their expectations, things come together, the pieces fit, and then they can justify paying guys. But if they all of a sudden look at it like, I know it's half a season, but I don't really strongly believe in this young core all of a sudden. We're talking about Barnes, Barrett quickly. That can change some things. And then the last little piece here is that Granger went on to say it's all worth keeping in mind, given that the Raptors are thought to be looking for a significant piece to pair with Barnes, per one front office source with another team. Whether that happens now in the summer at the trade deadline, a year from now, is one of those NBA unknowables. So that is what I found interesting as well. It talked about pairing Barnes with a significant piece, but didn't even mention the draft. So what I get from that is maybe the Raptors have something in mind where they want to get another young star to pair with Barnes, ideally a guard, and just a impactful asset. And maybe they don't feel they have that right now. Again, with a lot of question marks with Quickly and with Barrett, you don't know if he can continue to improve and be a game changer. So maybe the Raptors have ideas of sooner or later, we're going to have to go get that premier guard alongside Scotty. Like, I'm just using this as an example, but like a De'Aaron Fox type player, like a dynamic guard, I think would be a perfect fit with Scotty. And that's what we were all hoping Quickly could become, right? Something along those lines. But that just hasn't happened. So maybe the Raptors pivot and they go to a different vision of how they see this Scotty Barnes-led franchise. Because make no mistake about it, the Raptors are still building around Scotty Barnes, but the pieces around him could maybe look different. And again, this is not something that's going to happen in the next few weeks before the trade deadline, but it's all interesting things to think about when looking at the long-term outlook of this team. And then how much are things going to change when or if the Raptors luck out in the draft, right? They get a top pick. All of a sudden, is that guy going to be Emmanuel Quickly's replacement if they're able to get a Dylan Harper, or an RJ Bear replacement if they're able to get a Nace Bailey? If Cooper Flagg somehow comes here, how does that change things, right? So there's a lot still on the table, and I think that's the main takeaway here, that the Raptors are still so early in their rebuild. And I know this is all reportedly, this isn't facts or anything, or the foregone conclusion, but it does make a lot of sense. And I think I would agree that right now, the two untouchables, as reported here, and just using my general common sense and how I view this team, would be, Scotty Barnes and Grady Dick. So hopefully we see a lot of more progression from Grady, and hopefully we just see this team healthy with Quickly back, and we can properly evaluate what that trio in particular of barbecue looks like before we draw some strong conclusions. But you look at this Raptors team, and this is going to segue me into the other thing I wanted to talk about in today's pod. By the way, drop a like and subscribe if you haven't already. The Raptors are starting to win games. And when you talk about the draft, I know that doesn't sit well with a lot of people, because I went to X and I said it, like, it's nice to see this team playing well. It's nice to see them winning games. But you don't want the Raptors to all of a sudden fumble this tankathon after they played the first half perfectly in terms of draft lottery positioning. If now all of a sudden the Raptors start winning games, there I say it, push for the play-in, and before you think that's crazy, that 10 spot I think is wide open because the Bulls suck. The Raptors are going to hopefully have to, start to offload some of these guys who've been contributing, because you would think after the trade deadline, this team's going to look a lot different. They're going to offload some of those impactful veteran pieces that have been playing well lately, and by subtraction, this team will revert back to their losing ways. Because I know people want to go on and on about it doesn't build a good culture. You want to win. Forget about tanking. If the Raptors go for the play-in and they miss out on what could have been, and that is trying to get a top 3, top 5 pick, I think that sets this franchise back completely. For what? To feel good about making the play-in and to go one and done? It's like you got this far of having to suffer all these L's. You basically did it perfectly up until this last stretch of games. All you got to do is just eat one more half. At worst, you're going to get a top 5 pick. So I'd rather take that than the alternative of squandering this, pushing for the play and somehow getting that 10 spot, And then all of a sudden, you just ruin what could have been. You already messed the Wemby draft situation by going for it then. Don't mess it up again, especially when this draft is wealthy. And I know it's a wealthy draft, but you still want to be in the top 5. Because if you're not in the top 5, I don't think you're getting a game-changing talent or a potential game-changing talent. So for the Raptors, it's time to sell high, really, because you look at how they've been competitive winning these games. It's been the contributions from their veterans, from their bench. Bruce Brown remembered how to play basketball. He has had such an amazing stretch over these last couple of games. Chris Boucher was brilliant in that one. He scored 17 points in 18 minutes against the Atlanta Hawks. Kelly Olynyk has been playing much better. He had a nice game, 11 points, 4 rebounds, 5 assists. You look at those 3 guys, they have just uplifted this Raptors bench. And when you get this type of production from your bench, you're going to be in ball games, and that's going to stem to your starters, playing better. Because when you're off and you got guys coming in who can actually play and hold the fort down, it does a whole lot of good things to your psyche. And just, we're seeing it. Like, this team has been far more competitive. Guys start to feel good. You're playing well. You're winning. The defensive effort has picked up. So it's all good from a progression, player development, team development standpoint, but it's horrible for the tankathon. And you want to have strategic wins, but the last thing you want to see if you're a Raptors fan is this team reeling off 4 out of 5, 5 out of 6, and keep winning games. Hell, even Leo Rowden said it on the broadcast openly, and I respect Leo for keeping it real, because this season was always about the draft, and you got this far. Now's the worst time to start reeling off wins or going on a win streak. So you want to kind of again, be strategic with it. Sprinkle a win here or there, but you don't want to start going like this and start winning games in bunches, because there's a lot of bad teams in the bottom of the East. And if the Raptors go on a heater now, they'll quickly find themselves with the 5th, 6th worst odds. So hopefully, like I said, the Raptors can offload some of their vets. You get worse that way. You get assets for the future. And according to Spot Track, only 7 teams have more room under the luxury tax threshold than the $10.2 million that the Raptors have. And going back to that Grange piece, this was reported the Raptors are holding a lot of cards, said one opposing team source. They have space under that tax threshold, expiring contracts, veteran players, their own picks. They can be involved in almost any major trade across the NBA. So what's difficult, though, about the Raptors and their pieces that they have is, I think when you're looking at trades 1 for 1, so talking about Bruce Brown, Chris Boucher, Kelly Olynyk, Davion Mitchell, because those are basically the 4 that I would see the Raptors trying to part ways with. I know Jakob Poeltl's name has come up in the past, but Grage went on to say that, and I'm paraphrasing here, that for now they're going to keep Poeltl. It's hard to imagine they're going to get a first-round pick when there's already a lot of centers who could go at the deadline. Vucevic's name has come up, Valanciunas' name, even Aiden, Robert Williams III. But Grange went on to say, and I thought this was interesting, if they land an NBA-ready prospect, so Cooper Flagg, you would think Ace Bailey, Dylan Harper, they're going to keep Poeltl because they think they can have a bounce-back year next season. But he said if the Raptors end up drafting somebody less NBA ready, so let's just say the Raptors continue botch this, they keep winning, they go for the play-in, and all of a sudden they're not picking 1 through 5, they're picking 5 through 10, then Grange suggested that the timeline to move Poeltl, who will be seeking an extension, could shift to the summer. So that's very interesting. But in terms of this trade deadline, the next 2 weeks, it doesn't seem like Poeltl's going anywhere. So going back to those names of Brown, Olynyk, Boucher, and Mitchell, Grange said they're valued to have, second round picks of varying quality. But I think if you're looking for one-on-one deals, it might be tricky. And Jake Fisher said that the Raptors are motivated to move Brown, but then he put out something today. He was on the Nate Duncan podcast saying how it's difficult for the Raptors to move Brown because he's making $23 million. He's on that $23 million expiring. So, for instance, if a team like the Nuggets wants Brown, there's really no pathway one-on-one to trade for Brown. You would have to give up a guy like Michael Porter Jr., and there's no way in hell the Nuggets would do that. So that's the tough part. I think there is interest for guys like Brown, Olynyk, Boucher, but it's difficult now than ever to make deals, and especially a guy in Brown, who I think is one of the more top guys in terms of trade assets for what he could give the other team, he's probably the hardest to trade just because of what he's making. Maybe, Boucher is a lot easier at 10.8, Davion Mitchell. But then when you look at them collectively, I think that's where the value is at. And what I'm trying to get at here, and it's something that TSN's Josh Lewinberg confirmed, is that the Raptors are continuing to look into being facilitators in a bigger deal. And I'm going to read this from Josh Lewinberg's piece that he put out the other day. A more plausible scenario is the one that the Toronto Star recently outlined, and TSN can confirm that the Raptors would be open to and are continuing to explore facilitating a bigger transaction. It's complicated, and there are plenty of moving parts, but with Brown, Chris Boucher, and Davion Mitchell, they could cobble together north of $40 million in expiring contracts. That might be helpful in getting a disgruntled star like, say, Jimmy Butler to his preferred destination, like, say, Phoenix, as the third, fourth, or even fifth team in the deal, coming away with a few assets, picks or young players or both for their trouble. Note, the Cavs acquired Jared Allen for their part in helping James Harden get to Brooklyn in a multiplayer four-team trade 4 years ago. That's not to say the expectation or cost for the service should be a future all-star, but if you're opportunistic and the stars align, there's a benefit to being the team that assists somebody else's big move. So I think that's the best pathway for the Raptors here. The writing's on the wall for Jimmy Butler. The Heat got to trade him. They can't keep suspending him. They got to get something for him. And I know Pat Riley is stubborn, but the Raptors' best pathway of offloading these pieces, getting value in return, and subtracting these pieces so in turn you keep your team at a losable pace is by getting involved in a major trade, getting involved in a 4 or 5 team trade, whether that star is Jimmy Butler or even a Zach LaVine. The Raptors got to get in here somehow. And I think that's why they're trying hard to be facilitators, because going back to Brown, that's basically the most realistic way the Raptors are going to get rewarded with something of substance for Brown versus trying to find one-on-one, because the teams that are interested in Brown, they simply cannot make that happen without having other teams involved. So the Raptors are valuable here because they have expiring contracts, bigger contracts that are needed in a big trade, but they need something to go down, and they got to get involved in something like that. Because the worst thing for Brown, I think, is all of a sudden if you can move him and then you're entertaining buyout options, because the Raptors certainly would want to get something back for him. I think that's been the intention of this team since they traded for him in that Siakam deal. I guess the other scenario is the Raptors hold on to him till the summer and then you explore sign and trade options. Maybe something comes up then, but I think the Raptors would much rather deal with this now. So I think all eyes are on like the Jimmy Butler sweepstakes. I think if the Raptors end up winning in any type of deal, it's going to be a multi-team deal. It's going to be them being facilitators with some of these players and getting something done, because the Raptors are very valuable to, a team like Phoenix trying to land Jimmy Butler. So I think that's something to look at here, because if there's not a multi-team deal, I really think it's tough to move Brown just based on the teams who are interested in him. They don't have the flexibility to make him work. Maybe, the Raptors could salvage it. And like I said, individual deals for Boucher, maybe Olynyk. But I think with Brown, that's the toughest one to move unless it's part of a larger deal. So I think this is all interesting stuff. I think the Raptors are a team that's going to continue to come up on all this. And I think, just knowing all this and just Masai and Bobby, like I would guess, they really want to push for being a facilitator in a larger deal, because they know that's the best bang for their buck. That's when you can offload guys and you're getting your best value back. And again, like not to say the Raptors are going to end up with a Jared Allen type player from this, but maybe they could get paid handsomely and maybe they get something that turns into something down the line. And again, from the Raptors perspective, that's what you want in this. You want future assets. So I think the Raptors got to look for trades. They got to be aggressive and they got to offload some of these guys, because now is the time to sell. And you want to get rid of these players because, again, that's how it makes your team worse for now. And you don't lose sight of what's the most important thing for this season. And that's playing for the draft lottery. So I'm not entertaining the plan. I know Jack said it. Forget about Tank Nation. I'm against that. I think the Raptors picture is crystal clear here. And the next necessary step to make that happen is they got to offload the necessary pieces at the deadline, and hopefully it can come in one larger trade. So you don't run the risk of not getting anything or not making any trades because of how difficult it is to make trades with some of these contracts that they're dealing with, namely Bruce Brown. So this is all interesting stuff, guys. A lot of great hypotheticals, but I thought I would just drop all these bombshells on you. A lot to think about with this team. I think, when you have a team like the Raptors that is still so young, literally the first full year of the rebuild, like everything's on the table, and a lot can change in a heartbeat. So we'll see how this team looks after the deadline. We'll see what other rumors come on out, and we'll see what ultimately ends up happening. But guys, let me know your thoughts to some of the talking points from today. Drop your comments down below. Like this video, subscribe, and you can go follow me on X at Luca Rosano 3. Thank you so much for watching. This is Luca signing off. Until next time, stay safe.